Last October, we looked at Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, where spoilers, at the end, Fred Krueger died forever. Yeah, no, just kidding. As today, we're going to look at A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, released the next year in 1988. This one was directed by Rennie Harlin, who also directed Die Hard 2. Harlan also directed Cutthroat Island in 1995, which I thought was notable because at the time it was the biggest box office bomb of all time, making $10 million back on a budget of almost $100 million. This one went a little better for him. On a budget of $6.5 million, it made back almost $50, making it the most successful Nightmare film to date, money-wise, and would stay that way all the way up until Freddy vs. Jason. So what happens in this one? Well, as you might have guessed, Freddy comes back, and he comes back to attack Kristen, Kincaid, and Joey, three of the protagonists from the last film. But it's not just them, as we also get some new characters, including Alice, her brother Rick, and Rick's friend Dan. Robert Englund, Ronnie Eastman, Ken Sagos, and Brooke Bundy would all return from Dream Warriors, and the cast added Lisa Wilcox, Danny Hassel, Tuesday Knight, Brooke Teese, Andreas Jones, and Toy Newkirk. The film, as previously mentioned, was a financial success, which was somewhat of a surprise to New Line Cinema, as they were literally running out of money while filming it. The film received mixed reviews from critics and is also referred to as the MTV Nightmare, as it seems the popularity of MTV in the 80s influenced the film a lot, with a bunch of jump cut editing and more increased wisecracks from Krueger. That served this film pretty well, as Freddy had some of his best lines in the whole franchise in this movie, although it would not serve very well in Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, but we'll get to that when we get to it. For now, we're going to look at Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, released in 1988. So our film begins with some blonde lady outside the Elm Street house. Well, actually, that blonde lady is Kristen, who was recast with Tuesday Knight after Patricia Arquette declined to return for this film. Kristen wanders around the Elm Street house where she hears Freddy and ends up pulling her friends Kincaid and Joey, also from Dream Warriors, into her dream. She also pulls Kincaid's dog into her dream, which ends up biting her on the arm, and they all wake up. Also, don't know if this is a reference or just coincidence, but Kincaid's dog is named Jason. The next day, and by the way we're about a year after the event of Dream Warriors, Kristen meets up with her boyfriend Rick and Rick's timid younger sister Alice. We also meet their athletic friend Debbie, Rick's friend Dan, who Alice clearly has a crush on, as well as Sheila, a math wizard who has asthma issues. Kincaid and Joey also confront Kristen at school and is like, dude, stop pulling us into your dream. It's like the 10th time this month. Freddy's not coming back. And Kristen's like, no, he's coming back. But surely Kristen's just full of it, right? Well, no, because that night Kincaid and Jason fall asleep and they both wake up in the junkyard where Freddy was buried in the third movie. Jason then digs up Freddy's bones and pisses on his grave, and that piss ignites in fire, which opens up hell and starts to put Freddy's body back together. So Jason resurrected Freddy. Haha, that's funny, get it? Well, Freddy's fully back and he's ready to kill Kincaid. Haha, just kidding, Kincaid crushed him with a car and that's it. Film over. Oh god, no, just kidding. There's a lot of cars and Kincaid is completely surrounded. Oh, and there's Freddy, and yep, he's dead. Well, that's one down. Let's go to Joey now, who falls asleep on his waterbed and wakes up to see one of the swimsuit models that was in a poster on his wall, nude and in the bed. Looks like there's someone else in there too. Oh god, it's Freddy, who pulls Joey in and kills him. It only took us 23 minutes, but 2 of the 3 surviving characters from Dream Warriors are already dead. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Rick is teaching Alice how to stand up for herself. I only mention this just because of how great of a character Rick is, and a genuinely good older brother. The next day at school, Kristen is smoking and worried as she hasn't heard from Joey and Kincaid, and Alice tries to comfort her and also tries to remember some sort of rhyme called Dream Master. Kristen then goes into class and sees Joey and Kincaid not there and figures, oh my god, they're dead, and she stumbles back and knocks herself out, I guess. She wakes up in a nurse's office to a creepy nurse who's actually Freddy, but then she wakes up again and it's actually a real nurse. She then learns that Joey and Kincaid did indeed die, and her, Rick, Dan, and Alice all end up going to the old Elm Street house. Before she can go in, however, she's stopped by her mother Elaine, who I thought died in Dream Warriors, but turns out didn't. I wish she had died though, as she's still terrible. In fact, she's even worse. When Kristen tells her that she's depressed because 2 of her friends died, Elaine's like, oh, you're just tired. And then she reveals she put sleeping pills in Kristen's food in an effort to get her to go to sleep. Luckily for Kristen, back when they were at the Elm Street house, Alice told her what the Dream Master rhyme was, and Kristen recites it and sends herself into a positive dream at the beach. But that doesn't last long as Freddy shows up and then sucks her into some quicksand, and back in the Elm Street house she goes. Before Freddy kills her though, he wants her to continue the fun, and he goads Kristen into pulling Alice into her dream. Freddy then throws Kristen into a boiler, and then she gets absorbed into Freddy's chest with more souls. Now I know what Doctor Who ripped off. Before she's fully absorbed though, she somehow transfers her power of pulling people into dreams over to Alice. Alice and Rick then race over to Kristen's house and go into a room where they find she's been burned alive. A few weeks later at school, Alice is in the bathroom with Sheila. Alice reveals to Sheila that she hasn't been sleeping, and Sheila reveals that she didn't sleep last night either, studying for a test. Alice then starts to smoke a cigarette, but realizes that she doesn't smoke, but you know who did was Kristen. You know how I mentioned Sheila didn't sleep last night? Well, that's gonna bite her in the ass, as her and Alice both fall asleep, and they're trapped in a dream with Freddy. Freddy then literally sucks all of the air out of Sheila's body, which is framed as a massive asthma attack, which kills her in the real world. Alice is in distraught, realizing that it was her fault and she killed Sheila, and then Dan tells Rick, bro, I think your sister's losing it, and Rick's like, no man, I think she's telling the truth, and then he Naruto bolts it down the fucking hallway just for no reason. Sometime later, Rick has started to fully believe Alice about Freddy, and much like her, he hasn't been sleeping. Alice is in class where a teacher is talking about Aristotle's dream philosophy, and fun fact, this teacher is played by Robert Shane, who is the founder of New Line Studios, who produced this movie. Alice then falls asleep while Rick simultaneously falls asleep in a school bathroom, trapping them in a dream together with Freddy. Freddy takes Rick to a martial arts dojo, and Freddy is invisible, and while invisible, starts whipping Rick's ass. Rick is unable to find his inner peace, however, and starts turning the tide. Unfortunately, we all know how this is gonna end, as Freddy gets the upper hand and kills Rick. And I want to take a minute to say that I absolutely loved this character. To this point, this was undoubtedly the best male character in the whole franchise. I mean, maybe the only... Well, there's been good male characters, but like he was... Out of like pure great people... I mean, he was a great older brother, you know, completely supportive of Alice. He was supportive of Kristen, even if he didn't fully believe her. You know, I mean, he was great. He was great, and I really wish he had made it for this film. It kind of sucks he died halfway through, because he deserved to live longer, and I wish he had been in the next film too. Maybe that could have made it better. And big props to Andreas Jones, who did a great job portraying him. Fun fact as well, in 1989, Jones was nominated for a Young Artist Award for Best Young Actor in a Horror or Mystery Motion Picture, but he lost to Lucas Haas, who played Frankie in Lady in White, which we also previously covered on the channel. Well, at Rick's funeral, we're now down to 3, just Alice, Dan, and Debbie, and Alice tells them that they're gonna overcome with mind over matter, which is something Sheila used to say. Debbie comments that Alice is changing all the time, but Dan realizes no, she's changing after every death. And sure enough, Allison goes home and realizes that she's inherited Rick's nunchuck skills, meaning that she's absorbing something from every single person killed in the dream with her. Later that night, Alice sneaks out to go meet Dan in front of a diner where they plan to meet with Debbie at her home. Alice arrives to see Dan not there, however, so she just decides to go see a movie instead. However, she falls asleep inside the movie theater and is sucked into the film with Freddy inside a diner. Freddy then uses Alice's mind to locate his next victim, which will be Debbie. Alice then wakes up at home and turns out it was a dream within a dream and she never left the house. She goes and meets with Dan and they begin to drive to Debbie's, and then they begin to drive to Debbie's again. Looks like they're looping. Meanwhile, things are not going well for Debbie as Freddy has arrived while she's bench pressing and rips her arms off. But it's okay because she gets these cool new insect arms. That's pretty neat. And she gets this cool new insect body and oh god, Freddy's turned her into a cockroach. Meanwhile, Dan and Alice realize that they're sleeping too and Freddy is completely looping them. Freddy, meanwhile, then crushes Cockroach Debbie to death, killing her, and Alice immediately absorbs Debbie's temper and sees Freddy on the road and attempts to run him over. Turns out in the real world, though, they actually were driving and they crashed into a tree, which has made Dan very injured. Dan gets taken to a hospital and Alice realizes that he's about to be put under, which will leave him defenseless. So Alice races home to go to sleep herself so that she can save Dan. After arming herself with mementos from all her friends and brother who died, she jumps into the dream to save Dan. Freddy ends up putting her and Dan in a spin cycle, however, before dropping them through a window into a church. Dan ends up getting very injured by the fall in the dream, however, which ironically saves his life, as in reality he starts hemorrhaging and the doctors save him and pull him back into consciousness. On the downside for Alice, that means she's completely alone and has to face Freddy by herself. She's doing a pretty good job of it though, as she inherited Rick's fighting skills and she starts whooping that ass, although Freddy doesn't really feel it much. Alright, let's try electricity! Yeah, good old hole in the chest. Oh, well, never mind. Alice then remembers the Dream Master rhyme though, and if you want to know what it is, it's "Now I lay me down to sleep, the master's a dream, my soul I'll keep. In the reflection of my mind's eye, evil will see itself, and it shall die." AKA, just make Freddy look in the mirror. And after he's shown his own reflection, the souls that he's absorbed start to rebel and destroy him. They eventually leave him with nothing left, and all the souls are freed. Freddy is now, well, nothing, and Alice is able to leave. A few months later, Alice and Dan are now dating and they approach a fountain in a park. Dan tells Alice to make a wish, but upon looking into the water, she sees the reflection of Freddy. She declines to tell Dan what she saw, however, and won't tell him her wish, because if she does, it won't come true, and that's the end of the film. And it is now, once again, time to pull up our Elm Street big board. So I gotta be honest, if you had asked me halfway through this film where I would have ranked it, I probably would have said last. However, the more this film went on, the more and more I liked it. Positives and negatives. Positives, really liked Alice. She fit in well. I really liked the whole concept of her absorbing her friend's traits. I don't know how that happened, to be honest, because Kristen gave her her power, but that wasn't one of Kristen's powers, I don't think. Maybe Alice already had that power and she was activated by absorbing Kristen's power, or maybe something she just got with Kristen's power. It doesn't make much sense, to be honest. But still, I liked Alice as a character. As I mentioned, Rick was fantastic. Like, he was probably the best male character in this whole franchise at this point. Dan was pretty good too. At first, he just kind of seemed like a dumb jock, but he had great development as the film went on as well. Roland Kincaid, as well as Joey, even though they were in it only briefly, were really good. You know, Tuesday Night tried her best as Kristen. She was kind of cringe. She had this really cringe monologue at one point that wasn't really believable. She was put in a tough spot, however, so I'll give her a pass. Robert Englund was incredible in this movie. Again, he had some of his best lines. I guess what was my negative? Oh, Kristen was kind of a negative, but most of it was positive. So I guess most of it was positive. The negatives would be Kristen kind of being, you know, and Alice getting her power not really making much sense. But overall, again, unfortunate thing about Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is it doesn't really feel like part of the franchise. It's like a whole other side story. Well, this connected to Dream Warriors, and I think did its best to build on it. So I am going to put this third. It wasn't quite as good as Dream Warriors, but it was a pretty solid film. So my rankings are as follows. Number 1, Nightmare on Elm Street 1. Number 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Number 3, Nightmare on Elm Street 4. And number 4, Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Well, Freddy died again at the end, so surely that's the last Nightmare movie, right? Yay! Yeah, no, Nightmare on Elm Street 5 Dream Child was the next one, and that one sucked. This one, though, again, I think was incredibly underrated, and I think it's definitely a Nightmare film worth seeing. I also may have forgotten to mention that this is a channel points request by Blade. Thank you, Blade, for using your points on this. I'm sure he'll also use his points on Nightmare on Elm Street 5, which again, sucks, but, you know, that's gonna become a running theme. And a slight spoiler for the future, in my opinion, this is the second to last good Nightmare film. If I'm being honest, we have 5 films left. Well, 5 if you count Freddy vs. Jason. And to be honest, I'd only say one of them is pretty good. So yeah, the next 2, hey, we're in for it in the next 2. But that's going to do it for my review of this one, Nightmare on Elm Street 4 Dream Master. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like. If you didn't like it, don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the video description down below. For all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taff. This has been my look back at Nightmare on Elm Street 4 The Dream Master, released in 1988, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.